Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Questions to Ask When Bidding Excavation Work. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default, but if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters today by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce our session moderator, Tim Vaughn. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm Tim Vaughn with Kentucky 811, and I will be the moderator for this session. You will receive a survey about today's webinars probably tomorrow in your email, and we'd appreciate it if you would complete that survey and provide your feedback. You'll also going to receive an email in the coming weeks that gives you access to the recordings of all the presentations from today. As Lucy mentioned, please submit your questions using the questions panel on your screen. It is my pleasure to introduce the speaker of this session, Eric Swartley, Senior Manager of Pipeline and Public Safety for UGI Utilities Incorporated. Eric is a Senior Manager of Pipeline and Public Safety with UGI Utilities Incorporated, which is a natural gas and electric utility serving 700,000 customers in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Eric has worked for UGI since 1979, has held numerous positions in operations, engineering, marketing, public safety, and compliance. In his current role, Eric oversees UGI's damage prevention, cross-border awareness, public awareness, and emergency management outreach programs. Eric has presented in several state and national forums and authored several industry articles for publication. So please join me in welcoming Eric Swartley.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the generous bio there and the opportunity to talk today to everybody here. It's a pleasure to join folks in the Midwest, even though it's virtual, not in person. We understand the conditions we're dealing with today, though, so thank you for that. The thing I do want to do, anytime we at UGI gather more than 2 people together, we go into a safety moment mode, and I'd like to share that with you if you don't mind. It's really appropriate today's topic regarding planning. So just a couple things, take a step back from a personal level and look at things like vacation. We never go on vacation without reservations, mapping, GPS coordinates, and kind of planning the sites we're going to see and whatnot. Similarly with education. Okay, 4-year commitment to college, MBA programs. We're making sure that we're evaluating, the right school, the right major, those type of things. And equally important, retirement as we prepare for, the years after work and whatnot, that we're in sync with our retirement financial plan, our Medicare, Medicaid, whatever it might be, whatever healthcare issues we have to address and whatnot. Our projects are really no different. From a planning perspective with projects, the importance and the consequences are equally challenging as to the results of that. So what I'll leave you with from a safety perspective is a quote by John Wooden, by failing to plan, you're planning to fail. So essentially, if you don't do it, the inverse is going to happen. The potential is greater. So I'll leave you with that safety message and I'm gonna hit a little background before I get into the 10 questions topic itself. So let me move forward with that. My Pennsylvania disclaimer, my 40+ years in the industry have been with UGI, as Tim mentioned, in the gas distribution business. So I am somewhat Pennsylvania contaminated or biased, if you will. But we have a law called the Act 287, started in 1974, amended through sunshine provisions every 10 years or so. One of the challenges we've had is we have a design ticket dilemma in Pennsylvania. We were seeing about 3 to 4% of total tickets each year focused on design, focused on planning. And we looked at the volume of work going on, an increasing volume of work. It really just didn't match up. It didn't make sense. Equally important, we've talked about complex projects in our law since 1996, though didn't put a lot of emphasis on making sure those meetings were taking place and that process was being followed. Well, along came Act 50 of 2017, and that shifted enforcement in Pennsylvania to the Public Utility Commission, who has a much tighter focus on pre-planning and the requirements and performance to the act. What does the act mean? How are we following those criteria? In that period of time, the effective date of that law was April of 2018. The current date, as far as enforcement, there have been over 16,000 alleged violation reports filed in Pennsylvania and over $1 million in penalties assessed. And that is an effort to really focus stakeholders collectively on reducing damages and increasing public safety. That's kind of my Pennsylvania disclaimer. That's where a lot of my experience comes from, though I've been involved nationally with AGA, CGA, and different organizations such as that. Some fundamentals to kind of set the tone, kind of some of our mantras, some of our philosophy. The goal is on time and on budget projects with reduced damage prevention. We at UGI can be any of the stakeholders under the one call law. We do the digging, we do the marking, we do the project management as well as design work internally in many cases. So again, all that balanced approach and that shared responsibility is important to us. We firmly believe that damage prevention begins the design phase. And if we are planning to and counting on reducing damages, we greatly increase the probability of that occurring. A question I ask is, does that one call statute support pre-planning? So there are many tools available through the statute and ultimately through enforcement if in fact those provisions exist. So it's one thing to really think about where you're at today and where you want to be if you're not where you think it could be most effective. Another point we've learned along the way is the project owner, the person who's paying the bill, controls the purse strings, has the most influence, okay, over the damage reduction initiatives that are applied and the success of that effort. So again, people generally respond to what they get paid to do. As well as Subsurface Utility Engineering, the American Society of Civil Engineering 3802, it really works. It does require, and we're learning to get better with that internally in our company. And what it requires is a focus on what is the right level of SUE on each project. Obviously, there's cost components that can be considered as well as time and resource constraints that way. Clearly, planning minimizes that excavator locator duel. We've all seen it occur. Tickets come in, work comes in, volumes at peak. Everybody's busy trying to get work done, and tickets aren't getting done the way they want them, the time they want them. The excavator is not marking in white or doing whatever, and then the duel begins. The kind of relationship goes south, and bad things can happen in that environment. The key thing to remember as we all focus on improving and getting better is that when things go wrong, there will be plenty of blame to go around. So again, it's not unique to any one party. Every stakeholder gets their turn in the barrel at one point or another. So, okay. With that, before I get into number one here, I want to just kind of say that the discussion today about the 10 questions is something we've developed over time. It was an article we did for the Excavation Safety Guide back in 2016 and updated it back in 2019 based on the change in the Pennsylvania law, which really strengthened some of the kind of questions, comments, suggestions we'll talk about today. So with that, again, there's no silver bullet. These 10 questions work. They can apply. There can be others that you'd add and maybe more unique to your situation, industry, challenges you're having might be more appropriate. So again, it's a guide. It's not a silver bullet that will fix every scenario that's out there. The impetus in why we moved to the 10 questions article and why we at UGI are subscribing to many of the aspects of that was that what we were seeing is that many excavators will bid work and they won't really have an understanding of what the one call statutory requirements are. And that is more prevalent when that excavator may be working in multi-states and not always in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, or Mid-Atlantic area. They may be even further away than that. And their statutes, though similar, are different and requirements can be tighter and enforcement varies across the country as well. So we do see that. We also see that they generally will jump into a project and not understand what facilities may be under the surface that they're going to be working around or near and just kind of bid every bid the same way. So that's a challenge we see as well. We also see that there's opportunity on smaller scope projects, multi-week projects versus the multi-month or multi-year projects, where some of the design aspects maybe aren't followed to or adhered to as closely because it's not that big of a job. And we do see a lot of problems in those kind of smaller scope projects that, in fact, is less design focused. Another challenge we see, and it's somewhat specific to PA law, but it's also a common sense approach to things. There are project owners who will work to indemnify themselves from any liabilities for damages for not following some of the requirements in the act. And in Pennsylvania, we have a provision called 515, Section 515, that it makes that illegal to do that. A project owner cannot indemnify themselves to pay for what they call extra work for spotting or locating the precise location of facilities that are marked out for work to be done. That's a kind of a dual, and it's a work in progress. Our new act is really focusing on those kind of things, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. And on the inverse of that, many excavators who, in fact, do that extra work and go the extra yard and are diligent and submit, a bill for that work, and it gets rejected, are reluctant to push back. So they're not going to go out there and bite the hand that feeds them, because the retribution traditionally has been they get kicked off the bid list. So at the same time, they're out there trying to be competitive on the cost bid, but recognizing to do it right, there may be some other elements that need to be considered. And that's where you need to be on the same page contractually, as well as with the stakeholders who you're going to be operating near and about. So with that, let's jump into the 10 questions. We'll start with number 1. Was there a design notification? Okay, number 1 in Pennsylvania. Okay, we require design notification anytime a drawing is prepared for excavation. It's a requirement that sounds pretty stiff. The fact is it hasn't been required or reinforced through any kind of act where there's a penalty if you don't do it. That's changing, as I said, in the new act, but historically, very low percentage of participation, and the quality and the steps that are required really get kind of jumped kind of through the hoop. It's a check the box type thing. With a growing interest in design build and combining some of the steps in a process, there's also some challenges with that approach. Philosophically, it's solid. If it's handled with diligence and integrity, it works well. But we've seen a lot of these kind of, because the design phase kind of gets skipped, tend to be a challenge in those areas. Okay. Poor information, no response to design, it really is a red flag. Many times in design processes, it's a check the box type mentality, and we see folks who will, yep, I got back from the sewer company, even though they said they had no records of the laterals or they don't mark them, and I'm going to move forward with my final design. Fundamentally, you really have an asset there. You're going to be crossing multiple times and don't know where it's at. So it should be a red flag, and it should be the starting point to dig for more information or consider the appropriate level of work that needs to be done to prepare for that project. In addition to the design phase, it's the best time to really evaluate and consider any abandoned line information that you can provide as a facility owner. So ask about that information as an excavator. Is there abandoned line information? Do you have multi-generational facilities? Do you have stuff that was in the turn of the century out there that's been abandoned for a number of years? All those things are potential for delays and cost overruns in the work that gets done out there. Number 2, what quality level of SUE is applied? Again, we talked about the SUE levels, and we'll get into that a little bit. But quality level D is really just a records review. It's a very preliminary look at things, not much legwork done. And the levels of SUE are intended to build upon each other. And they go from least efficient or least costly from D down to A. So it's kind of an inverse order. But each one builds on the other. C is actually the field level review, where you're looking and making judgments based on things you can see and are visual to you out on the job site. And then you roll into B, and it's more using geospatial, electronic locating methods and those things where you would have a design mark out or something completed. So you're getting a better visual and at least some feedback from the facility owners on what is involved in that scope of work. And lastly, there's A, which is really determining the precise horizontal and vertical position of that facility as it exists in the job site. So where's that important at, or why would you do that? Consider sewer pipe systems that are gravity-based. Okay, inverts require certain elevations. If you have a gas line that runs right through the middle of that new lateral tie-in, it's not going to work. Just, the gravity is the essential requirement there. So it's things like that that bring and draw that really to the forefront. But again, quality levels of sewer are important, and it's really about understanding what is going on out there and what you need to do, in fact, to adapt to that. Got a little problem here with the. Okay, so there we go. A little problem getting the clicker to work here. My apology. Number 3, are there any separation requirements that exist with certain facilities? There are certain requirements with certain aspects, and knowing the gas business as I do, we're one of those. But why would you want separation? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Future operations and maintenance, to be able to dig and work around that pipeline is of critical importance. That you have the ability to do that and do it safely. Other drivers, at least in our industry, or in metallic facilities such as the steel pipeline, may have a cathodic protection system on that. Those systems can be interfered with or impacted by facilities in proximity that are metallic and would detract from that protection, and or a contact that in fact would create an anotic cell and result in a potential leak or something down the road. So again, that's another real driver in that. Because of concern of damages for future excavation, if something is too close, it's really a matter of respecting those tolerance zones that are out there and ensuring that you have your tolerance zone covered in your facility. But what about your neighbor, the water line that may be a few feet away? Do in fact they have the tolerance zone required and the ability to work in that area safely and effectively and efficiently? Well, we know that tolerance zone brings some limitations in what you can do mechanically, at least in Pennsylvania. You have to spot the precise location before you can begin to excavate in that area with mechanized equipment. So again, a big production slowdown in that regard. Will the project be videotaped or photoed? Will it be memorialized? Okay, are we going to see the site? Is it going to be a record that sticks with that project to the duration? Well, the project documentation exists for existing conditions. It references document during construction. So you have a reference document as lines start to fade, snow conditions. Obviously, you can recall a ticket. There's generally a timeline required for that facility owner to respond to that. But a reference document such that is very helpful to be able to continue to work and follow up and understand where those facilities are from a document that's, again, memorialized in time. Obviously, one of the big drivers in documenting those sites is about damage claims and that documentation that you may end up in court someday or in litigation of some nature. That can fall into a variety of things, whether it be sidewalks, curbing, driveways, or any of the variety of things that could get damaged, and whether you did it or not, you could get blamed for during construction. Again, provides great protection for general liability purposes. Slip, trips, and falls. That sidewalk was already offset. I didn't break the sidewalk. It was existing when we were there, and that documentation would be, again, exceptionally helpful in that case if in fact you're in a courtroom. Use of permanent markers or offset marks are strongly encouraged as well. Great videotape of that stuff. If you're milling a street curb to curb, obviously you're going to mill off the lines if there's a street, a gas main or water main in the middle of the street, and you'll lose those. So offset marks are encouraged, and again, documenting those, either video or photo, is helpful to keep that point of reference and maintain those offset marks. Okay. The other question I throw out is anyone using drones to document job sites? It's discussion we have often and we hear in some of our industry associations about the use of technology that in fact give you good documentation, historical information, and do it efficiently and with very, very good clarity and distinction as far as quality. So good opportunities that way as well. Number 5, will there be a pre-construction meeting or will the excavation area be marked in white? This is a big area when it comes down to some of the CGA best practices we all interact with. But project meetings prior to the start of excavation are a highly leveraged activity. It lays the landscape out there for a better understanding of what the work is, what the impacts could be, if there are situations that need to be handled differently, timelines for work, et cetera, et cetera. So we in Pennsylvania are learning more and more about the quality and the value of project meetings through the enforcement effort to ensure they're happening. Essentially in Pennsylvania, if you don't attend a project meeting, there could be an associated penalty with that work. So they're required for large projects, and we have a ticket type that kind of mirrors that. So any scope of work over greater than 1,000 feet lineal, intersection or greater, is going to require a project meeting notification in Pennsylvania. If you don't attend that meeting, or you're not clear, you have no assets there, you open yourself up to a subject of a penalty. So there's really a push to get people to meet, talk, discuss, plan, and communicate around these issues. Again, from a CGA perspective, one of the best practices is for smaller scope work, white lining proposed excavation is a win-win. There's absolutely a huge benefit to letting that locator know where you're working, where you want it marked, and from your perspective, to be able to move that project along, send a crew out, knowing with confidence that that line will be marked and the job site will be ready to go when you're ready to go. So get the white paint out, do the meetings, whichever is appropriate for the type of work. But again, when you're bidding work, you want to make sure you'll know what that format's going to be. So in fact, you can build it into your work schedule, your Gantt chart, however you're tracking that work. Are there any project restrictions? Okay. Signs like that may be out there. Many industries have surveillance requirements while excavation is occurring around facilities that may be determined critical. You know, we in the gas industry are subject to enforcement by PHMSA, the Public Pipeline Hazardous Safety Administration. And those folks, you know, they have rules under the DOT 192, 195, et cetera, that we must follow. And we have a critical facility surveillance program. So we apply those anytime there's work around, near, or exposing a critical facility. That's something you'd want to build into a project if in fact you're going to be working around an asset that's going to require that kind of handling in that regard, because it could be potential delays or scheduling concerns you have to deal with. As well as sensitive public areas, schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and HOAs. Some of those folks require notification to work in their neighborhoods, and there's just requirements are out there that make good sense in public areas to in fact ensure you're not impacting those operations. Work that impacts the flow of vehicular or pedestrian traffic or public transportation, all are going to get attention. When you get, you know, Joe or Jane public riled up about, you know, making their work drive every morning 10 minutes longer or impeding traffic at the mall area, whatever it might be, you're going to get some retribution on that for sure. You're going to hear about it. So again, are those restrictions in place, and what is in fact the timelines you require to work? Are there limited hours of work? Can you work only evening hours? Can you work only from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., you know, off-peak traffic cycles? So all impactors in your work and things you want to know before they happen so you can build those in to your pricing and project completion. Are there any environmental concerns, waterways, shade tree commissions, things you may not think about being obvious, but in some historical areas, you have architectural review boards that really are really finicky about what happens around their facilities, as well as in their infrastructure and streetscape areas. Are there any existing facility relocations required? Okay, if they're required, you want to make sure you're accounting for that work in your schedule, or are they going to be completed before you begin construction? That's of critical importance, and I can relate from the gas industry in particular, where there are going to be assets that we can't take out of service certain times of the year, and I'm sure other industries have like conditions. Those situations lead to long lead times. The schedule can be very costly if they're not considered in the design pre-construction phase. It may be a cost that somebody's going to incur, and sometimes the battle to determine who's going to pay that cost is part of the delay inherently. But you're sitting there idle and work's not getting done. So those questions become important, as trivial as they sound in some cases. Additionally, coordinating with multiple excavation contractors on site. So having multiple, you know, paving, curbing, sidewalk folks in, pipeline, somebody doing some telephone cable work, all that on a job site gets very, very congested and can be very contentious. And somebody, if there's not a general, has to manage that scope of work and all those competing interests out there. So give that some consideration. And again, it's a great question to ask in advance because it becomes very costly on the back end. On the rate, will any existing facility require special consideration or care? Okay. Again, relating to the gas industry, we have multiple types of materials out there that our facilities are made up of: plastic, cast iron, bare or coated steel, all have different structural support requirements, which need to be considered. Cast iron is one of those things that, if in fact is unsupported, structurally very brittle and it's going to be susceptible to damage either at the time of construction or later. So just an example, one of the things that need to be considered. Additionally, any damage, no matter how minor, needs to be evaluated, whether it be a coating scratch on a piece of coated pipe, break on a tracer wire or tracer wire insulation damage. All those things have down the road effects or impacts that need to be considered. And somebody could come back and bill you for something that happened months prior after your job is done. Okay. Loading impacts need to be considered as well. When you look at materials where you're going to be stripping off maybe paved material or cutting down a lot of fill in an area where there's a gas line buried 6 feet deep, and now it's 3 feet deep, running heavy graders, pans, milling machines across that area can have a substantial impact on that piping. And again, create potential liabilities down the road need to be considered. Additionally, not while one call statutory issues circle around us, so does OSHA. There's a subpart P section which also talks very heavily and very consistently about facilities requiring consideration, and those that are existing have kind of a special place and are required to be protected during excavation. Number 9 is trenchless excavation to be used on a project. Great technology. We are a big user of that, as most of the industry is. It's one of the things that's cost effective. It actually enhances productivity, getting work done, particularly in crowded areas where there's a lot of above ground congestion and improvements made. It's also an area that we've learned over time that you got to ask questions about it being used, because the technology to some degree has outpaced the regulation and guidance. We've been using bullets and missiles since the 1970s. And in fact, we've just adopted a law in Pennsylvania in 2006, where we adopted the North American Society of Trenchless Technology, HTD good practices. So the technology and the enforcement has come along, and we're seeing, the kind of damages related to drilling work, missile work, and that type of thing. And again, to just catching up with the technology today. So the spotting and daylighting requirements through quality level A are certainly appropriate, required for this type of work. That costs more money generally. You got to bring a back truck in or hand dig. So those considerations need to be made again when you put your bid price in. Your bore plan should be developed in the design phase. If you're going to outsource the drilling work, make sure that the driller has a bore plan considering the existing assets. Or again, delays, damages, all those things are going to be on the forefront or on the screen for you. And then we look at trenchless work. Again, we're big fans of it. We really appreciate the savings and the opportunity. But it's a situation where, while there's a low probability of a damage occurring with trenchless, the consequences generally can be pretty significant, particularly on the gas industry side, where you might drill into a gas line under a paved street and there's nowhere for the gas to escape. So you're seeing situations where now you've not just got a damage, but you got evacuations and you got potential issues where gas migration could be causing even greater issues. So this kind of planning and bore plans and spotting in advance and ensuring there's compensation for that are really, really big opportunities to prevent such tragic events. Number 10, are there backfill or compaction considerations? We all love, great, smooth, flat, unimpeded roadways to drive on. They're critical to, compaction is critical to maintaining those quality roadways, no doubt about it. So we all have a vested interest in getting that right. And that's where the backfilling and compaction become really critical. Certain facilities, again, are installed to specific standards. They have backfilling requirements around them. Compaction in certain lifts, materials getting cast iron, plastic, coated steel material, all have implications if, in fact, the coating is damaged. The plastic pipe might be gouged to a certain percent, needing replaced. All that can happen by compaction and driving a rock or stone through a piece of pipe out there that may happen. So again, that can all happen when exposed and or when backfilling begins and you start putting that loading on that pipe that we talked about previously. And while enhanced compaction is important, the impact on those facilities need to be considered. You start using a vibratory compaction tool around a cast iron main, and you greatly increase the probability of that brittle pipe becoming fractured, if not today, down the road as conditions and settlement occur. So big factor in this considerations you build in for issues in the project today, as well as liabilities going forward. Pardon me. One more thing there. So knowing what's below is really key, and it's really the mantra of 811. Call 811, design, construction, project planning meetings, use those tools available through the one call centers, and make it happen. And that's where the opportunity is to share nationally and look at statutes in different states and try and pick the best. And can we apply that in our state? Is it something we could get into our legislation, or a tool we could use in our center to make damages less frequent and productive work even more common? Pardon me. In the end, it's really about preventing damages to underground facilities. Okay, can we prevent those damages from occurring in the beginning? By planning, we can do that. It's really about leveraging relationships. If you have those project planning meetings, those design meetings, we are looking and working with those existing facility owners. if something doesn't go as planned, the opportunity to recover from those and maintain a good relationship are even more prevalent once you've established that good groundwork up front. So use those processes to help develop that. Some other tools to help you get there, Common Ground Alliance, a big promoter of the regional partnerships. In Pennsylvania, we have nearly 30 regional partnerships throughout the state, and very good, highly leveraged activities when it comes down to the 4 C's of communicate, collaborate, cooperate, and coordinate. I could give you countless examples in some of our regional partnerships where there have been collaborative efforts and 6-figure savings on large projects due to coordination, whether it be worksite savings, paving savings, those type of things, all with making the job easier, more economical, done on time, and having less impact on the public. So really good opportunities to talk and get in those environments. Some of those meetings are quarterly, monthly, but again, a great opportunity. If your state's not pushing those now, it's just a great opportunity to get involved with regional partnerships. And the last tool I'll kind of throw out there, it's something new in Pennsylvania. We've just got under our belt in the last year or two. It's called Coordinate PA. It's a GIS based system where, in fact, you load your projects, your proposed work into a GIS based system. It's a one-call platform. It already has our existing facility information. So it provides the opportunity to coordinate gas, water, telecom, electric, all the work that's going to be done underground, paving projects, streetscape work, all that stuff can be coordinated, placed in Coordinate PA. You can make it public or private if there, in fact, are competitive issues you're concerned about. But at the end of the day, it puts all that work in one place. You look at overlaps. That's where your opportunity is really to collaborate on savings, particularly on the paving side, where we all are going to work in that street in the next year or two. Let's see if we can't get synced up and get that right. Coordinate PA provides a platform, a tool to do that. It manages some very granular detail as far as bid date, construction date, permits and whatnot, all can be managed through that process. So the real cool part about it is it resides on the one call platform today, GIS, and it's all available at the cost of a ticket. So very economical when you look at the power and the overall planning coordination capability. So with that, I'll close up and just say thank you very much for the opportunity. Like I said, it's great to be in the Midwest virtually today with all you folks, and hopefully there are some things you could draw out of that, take back to your shop, put into play, and make a difference in your damaged portfolio. Can we get better? That's what it's all about, doing and sharing that information as we go.
All right, thank you, Eric. We are now going to begin answering the questions submitted for today's presentation. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the question pane in your audience control panel. So I will wait to hear some questions that pop up. You type them in on your side. Any questions for Eric today? We'll just hang around for a sec.
Sure, no problem.
Any last minute questions coming in for Eric? All right, I don't see any questions, but I see a good presentation. Thanks, from Chris Galloway.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Carly, and the team over at Indiana, Kentucky 811. It was a pleasure sharing time with you folks today.
Of course. All right, I will close it out. Thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, please visit the contact page on the conference website. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you in another session, and have a great rest of your day.